Here's a new collection from Henry Glass called Nana Mae IV. It's a really cute 30s line. It has daisies and elephants, farm animals, little Bo Peeps, and her sheep. And I got this line of fabric at the same time I got this die project from AccuQuilt. This is making their Courtyard BOB block on board. And it's a 10-inch finished square. And when I saw how the flower looked, I thought it really reminds me of the flower on these fabrics. So with the two there, it was a great partnership to come up with this adorable little runner. It's 42 by 18. So first we're going to cut these into smaller pieces so that we can put them on the die and die cut them with the AccuQuilt Go. So I'll get these cut and then I'll be back to show you how we die cut all the pieces and then how to make the block. So the dies are labeled with the letters and the pieces in the pattern are labeled with the letters, so you know which fabrics go on which. So for like the circle, there's only 3 circles in the pattern, so I was able to layer up all 3 to cut the A circles. This one, we need 12 of them, and so I cut 6 for this round, and then I will cut 6 more for the next round. For the B petals, we cut 6 of those, and we'll cut 6 more on the next round, which are right here. And I've learned the hard way, though I like to label everything, don't leave the label on when you run it through because it really presses it into the fabric. And you want to be able to pull it off without leaving any residue on your fabric. So then this guy was D1. So I have 6 more D1s. Now the D1s and the D2s are too close on here for my taste. I feel like I'm overlapping them. So I will run the D2s separately. And the same thing here. These 4 pieces are too close to this one, so I'll run those separately. Put your mat on and feed it through the machine. Okay, and again, I find it easier to flip it over on the mat, sort of tap it, and pull the die up. You get, most of the time, less stickage, but this time they wanted to stick. I also am putting the fabric right side down on the die so that we don't get a mirror image of the pieces. Some of these I think are symmetrical, but just to be safe, it's better to just do them all the same way. So right side down on the die, wrong side up. And then these are very close, D1 and D2, so I'm going to leave the D1 sticker on there so that I know that's what these are. Now we have to cut all our E's. And again, some people would probably overlap them. I just think that you'll get a cleaner cut if you don't overlap any of the pieces when you cut with it. Alright, so in this case, these are all my white shapes, the E's. So I just cut one large strip that will cover all the shapes at once versus cutting individual shapes, rectangles for each shape. That will speed up this cutting process and your and your regular cutting process. Make sure your mat is covering it, and in it goes. Okay. Alright, so in this case, as I pull these off, I'm going to label them so I know which is which. So I've already written out on my stickers E1, E2. Okay, then I need to cut the other half and we'll be all ready to start assembly. Alright, so now we're moved on. We've got everything die cut. We're ready to build our courtyard block. It does involve a Y-seam, which I will walk us through. But for the most part, if you go slow and easy, it will go together for you. So the first thing we need to do is we need to sew the green to the white. We have 2 different colors. There are 8 of them. And the beauty of the AccuQuilt system is they've die cut these. If I lay it on a flat piece here, you should be able to see. These edges, there is a flat blunt edge, and then there is a curved edge. And then this piece has flat edges and a curved edge, and the same here. So when you go to put these together, you know which way it's gonna go, because the round edge goes to the round edge and the straight edge goes to the straight edge. And then later when we go to sew it, this blunt edge will line up with the straight edge of this guy. So the first thing is you're gonna sew all of these onto here, and then you're gonna press them and then sew these on here. And it looks like this when it's done. And how I pressed it is I pressed one going towards the green and one going out to the background. It just let it lay flatter. It didn't create a lot of bulk right here at the seam point. And you want to make sure your seam point, your point is 1/4 inch away from the edge. That's your seam allowance when we go to sew this together. So you're going to make 8 of those. 4 of this color and 4 of this color. And then the next step is to mark all of these. You're gonna make a Y seam right here. So it goes, pull this back in for you to see it just a second. Let's take these out. So let's say we're gonna put this in here. So you're gonna sew a Y seam here, and what a Y seam is, if you look, this is a straight, and then the Y, so that is a Y. So how you do it is you're going to sew this and stop 1/4 inch from that corner. So from here, stop 1/4 inch from that corner, which should be the exact same spot. And then you're going to fold it and sew this seam together. And that'll make the petal. So first what I do to do this is I'm going to mark all of these to get my 1/4 inch point right there. And how I do that, pencil and a ruler. And you want to make sure, I'm a huge fan of Friction iron-off pens, but in this case you want to have a washout or erasable pen because you are going to be pressing it and you don't want to lose your marks when you iron this. Trust me, I've done it. It's not fun. So, because then you have to remark everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the ruler, and it is easier to just draw a line, put the edge of the piece on the 1/4 inch line and just draw a little line about a 1/2 inch here, and then rotate it, put the 1/4 inch on the other side, draw another 1/2 inch line, and where those two lines intersect, right there, that is where your needle needs to stop and start when sewing the Y seam. So if I flip this back over here upside down, when I sew this on here, I'm going to stop. When I sew the pink on, I'm going to stop at that dot. When I sew the purple on, I'm going to stop at that dot. And then when I sew up this seam, I'm going to stop at that dot. So that dot becomes our guide for the whole flower assembly. So to start with, if you're like me and you like to chain sew, first I make all of these, then I mark them all, then I'm going to sew the big green flower to the pink 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and I'm going to sew the little green flower to the purple 1, 2, 3, 4 times. That gets me down to just having 8 components instead of 16. Then once I have those units sewn, I will go in and sew this whole unit to this unit and sew it up. And we're going to walk through all of that, and I'm going to get over to the sewing machine so you can actually watch me sew it, but I wanted to talk about what we're going to do. Then we're going to assemble the whole circle, assemble our frame, and then sew the circle into the frame. So let's get started. I've got these done. I'm just going to go ahead and mark them, and then I'm going to move on to the next step. All right, so these are going to go together, and then these. All right. All right, so we're ready to sew our Y seam, and we're going to first sew all of these to this part of the petal and all of these to this part of the petal. Then we're going to sew these together. So to do that, now there is a blunt end on that piece and a blunt end on that piece, and they should line up perfectly. All right, so I'm going to start on with this piece on top so that I can see my X I've drawn, and I put the needle point down right in the center of the X and work my way out to the edge. Now remember, all of these edges are biased, so they will stretch if you handle them too much. So we're not going to, pull them a lot. We will align it, get it in spot, but we want to make sure it is aligned without stretching it out. That being said, we're also not going to do a lot of pressing. We're going to just lightly press these until we get it all together, and then we can do a full press. So I hand cranked the needle down into the center of the X. Okay, so now we've turned you down so you can see the needle. You can see where this needle goes through the center of the X, and then we just machine sew it up all the way to the end. The one thing I didn't just do, let me show you on the next one. Anytime you do a Y seam, you want to make sure that you secure the stitch at that spot. So when I take the first stitch, I should reverse stitch 1 or 2 stitches, being very careful to not go past the center of the X. So let's do another one. I'll show you it. If you forget, your seam may pull when you do your Y seam. So it's a good practice to just not forget. But if you do and you don't want to go back, you can try it and see how it works. So I take 2 stitches, I reverse stitch, and then I come back. And that's going to secure it so when we're doing the Y seam, it just doesn't pull the stitching out. And I also find it really handy when you're doing all these oddball shapes that you can easily sew wrong. I will lay them out and make sure that they're all going the same way before I sew them. It's better to check before you sew than after, because then you gotta rip it. And this is a good practice no matter what you're sewing, because you can make sure they're all right sides together. You can make sure they're all going in the same direction. A lot of mistakes I see is when people just start picking pieces up and they can turn and twist them and they're talking or they're distracted, and then they come back and they sew 20 pieces the wrong way. So if you already have it laid out and you get distracted and you come back, they're still laid out right. Alright, so again, needle down, couple stitches back. Okay, so I have now taken these and I've pressed them. And I press them towards the solid petal in both cases to get rid of the bulk in the seam. So press towards the pink, just press towards the purple. So now we have these 8 units that need to be sewn together, and you can see there's a V there because we've already done one branch of our Y. There's the other branch of the Y, and there's the stem of the Y. So how we start is we're going to put this over on the pink put this one onto the pink. Align the top edge, which again is why we use these AccuQuilt dies. They are extremely accurate, way better than hand cutting them. And then we're going to sew down to that X. And I like to, I picked the only one, the one I stitched past, so it's okay, we can show you what you do. So I have 1 stitch past my center, and I just need to pull that stitch out. Alright, there we go. So now it stops right on that center. Get rid of that so you can see better. So now we go ahead and we align that edge with that edge, and I like to pull this purple out of the way so I don't accidentally sew it. And if you need to use a little wonder clip there, you can. Alright, so we're going to start at the end. Now if you look at my setup here with an angled device and this purple tape, I did do a video on YouTube all about how to set up your machine for 1/4 inch seams. It's called How to Make a Perfect 1/4 inch Seam. So make sure you check that video out, and that's the Whimsical Workshop. Alright, so we're going to line up the end, go slow. Any of these times you're trying to be precise, speed is your enemy. This is why we anchor that stitch, is because we are pulling against it when we pull that purple back. So if we didn't anchor it, we would be popping that stitch, and we don't want to do that. So we go down, and we're gonna stop right there. And this is a purple thing. It's a great tool to keep by your machine. It helps you, like you see, I'm holding things in place. We get to this spot, and we reverse stitch a couple stitches. Again, just to anchor that spot. Clip your threads. Then we flip this open. So there's that one. Okay, sorry, there's that one. Now we need to close this up. So how I do it is I fold this in half. So again, the green and white gets folded in half, and that should align my last seam, which is right here. So now I'm going to start at the top, and then I'm going to, this is a washout pen, and I'm going to mark so you guys can see it. Okay, where I put that mark, that is the end of this seam, the end of that seam. So I'm going to sew down to that, which is also the end of this seam. So this is where, if you're accurate and you stop and start at the right spot, Y seams are very easy. And you can see it's a very, methodical, take your time, go slow. It's not hard, it's just you have to be precise. And so you have to have some control and some patience. Y seams get a bad rap. They're not that bad, and they let you do so many other things in quilting. All right, so I hit my mark. I actually, if I take another stitch, it'll go past it, so I lift my foot up and push the piece out of the way and then re-stitch backwards. So if you think the next stitch is going to go past that dot, lift this up, pull it back and then stitch it. It's a lot easier than trying to break it at the end. So then we'll open this up. Okay, and there is our Y seam. So to press this on the back, and I always say press from the front, not the back, unless you're doing Y seams. It helps to do your first press from the back on a Y seam so that you can manipulate how it's going to lay. So in this case, I'm going to push this towards the pink, that towards the blue, and then, or purple, and then push this towards the purple. Okay, so every time I do this, I'm going to push this bottom one towards the purple. So this one will go this way. That will help the petals look like the purple petal is raised and the pink petal is recessed. So we've got those two sewn together. We have to do it 4 more times, and then we repeat it here, and we'll just repeat all the way around. All right, so we're over here at the ironing board, and I'm going to show you the pressing for this. I'm pressing on a wool mat. This is from the Gypsy Quilter. It makes your seams lay flatter. I really love using it. If I think about it, I will put a link below for you. All right, so first, all of the green and background pieces go towards the solid pieces. All right, now that I've gone all the way around, we're going to press these towards the purple. And the easiest way to do that is to actually go down the pink, because it'll force it to go to the purple. Okay, now that everything is where I want it, let's flip it over. And I'm just making sure the seams are going the way I want them to. And there we go, we press that. Now, the center for this is a circle. And if you wanted to, and you were really good at set-in circles, you can do this little circle. Set-in circles, the smaller they are, the harder they are. I already did one set-in, and didn't like the way it looked. So I am appliquing my circle. It's a little cheater way, but in the end, it's what's gonna look best for this runner. And then I will finish the edges with a yellow thread for this so that it just sort of disappears. So I peel off the paper. In this case, it's there's nothing in the back of that, so I'm just going to put my backing paper on underneath, and I will center this guy on here. Know that in the block it's going to look like in the quilt it'll look like this. So if I have a little bunny here, I'm going to make sure he's going upright. And I'm just going to press that in place. Okay, and then once that's done, I just peel this off the back again, and we're just going to leave that. Now the next step is to make the frame that goes out on the edge here. And AccuQuilt gives you these little triangles that on both halves that line up. But first I'm going to sew these into, I'm going to sew these with a 1/4 inch seam to create an outer frame, and then we'll put set this circle into that frame. All right, so we have our frame and our circle, and we're going to set it in. And you put the glue on the circle, and I'm using a glue stick. This will help us align the frame with the circle before I take it to the sewing machine. And then I have a seam at each quadrant that I'm going to align with the pink triangle. And then the arrows, whoops, hang on a minute. You want to make sure you put it right sides together. So, it seems weird that it goes like that. So lay it on top and then flip it over is the quickest and easiest way to align it. And all of the little triangles from the die should line up as well. And you just glue the circle to the frame, and then when I go to sew it, I know it's all aligned and it's held in place, and I don't have to fight with pins, and it makes this whole thing a whole lot easier. There we go. And it's just coming out so sweet with this 30s print. This is Nana Mae from Henry Glass Studios. Nana Mae IV. There have been 3 other Nana Mae collections, and they just are the cutest, sweetest little prints. So when I was given the job to design something with this die, I thought, how fun would it be to have a 30s table runner? So that's what this is. Perfect for spring or baby shower, or just to brighten up a kitchen or cabinet. And if you get some glue where you don't want it, this is just washout glue, so you could just take a wet towel and wipe it across the fabric and it will take it right off. Or if you wash it, it'll all come out in the wash, but more often than not, just a wet washcloth will do it. All right, we're just about to the end here. And thankfully it all lines up. Oh, need a little more glue. All right, now, look at that, no pins. Just take it over and I run a 1/4 inch seam all the way around the circle. and then we'll press it open and we will have our block made, and we only have one more to go. All right, so we're ready to sew our circle in, and you can see it's all glued in place. We're just going to run the 1/4 inch guide along the circle, but I don't have to pull out pins, I don't have to align it, it's already in place. So we just go slow and easy, and you want to make sure the fabric in front of it is smooth, and if it doesn't, then just lift the presser foot and reposition it to make sure you don't avoid any pleats, which is the #1 thing that can happen when sewing a circle, a set-in circle. And again, here's a seam. I want to make sure it's tucked under nice and flat. So you're going to go slow and steady, especially if you've never done this before. There we go. All sewn. You do have to, if you've glued it and you've glued it too far down, you do have to make sure you get it pulled up enough so that when you press it, it doesn't cause a rolled seam. So I'm just making sure that I've got it all pulled up before I take it to the iron. See right there, you can see there was 1/8 of an inch there glued. And again, be careful, this is bias. You don't want to distort it. Okay, let's go press it. Okay, we got it all sewn. Now we're going to press it, and then we'll have our block done. And I press out to the background. Okay, there's our block, all done. Here is the Courtyard runner all quilted. Let's go in a little closer. We just echoed it, and we did a little daisy. You can see it in the center there. We did a daisy border around the outside. So there it is, all ready to go. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.